Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Bostrom's b.Cast, highlighting discussions, insights, and trends in the crazy world of association management. Today's guest is Josh Dobbs, senior designer at Bostrom. Very excited to have you on the show, Josh. How are things in Texas?
Things are great. It's hot and full of ants.
There you go. Texas. Well, everyone has a different path, to winding up in a career in association management. And our paths crossed quite a bit, a few years ago, where you were working with Leche League. And I'm really curious, and I know that the listeners will be curious as well, as to how does a graphic designer like yourself and the background that you have lead you to association management. So tell us a little bit about what that journey was all about, leading you to association management and to the world of design.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start sort of chronologically in terms of, the world of design kind of came first. And that really was born out of just trying to find something that I was good enough to graduate college with. So I, tried music, I tried other things, and none of them really felt like they were sticking. And I took an intro to graphic design course, which I was kind of against because I was more on the artistic side and I didn't want to use computers with art. And when I heard graphic design immediately, I think computers, it's not artistic. I don't even want to go near it. But I decided to just take an intro course. I ended up really liking it. I thought it was a nice blend of the artistic side, but also got the other half of my brain working and thinking more technically about how a creative piece is supposed to work out and, the rest of the environment with a targeted audience and things like that. So after college, I knew right away that I didn't want to go right into working for any sort of big named firm or any, like anything like a McDonald's or KFC or anything like that. I wanted to do something that either was really fun or had, some meaning behind it. And I had 2 interview prospects that were looking really well. One was for a toy company, which met the fun, and one which was for the Leche League International, which met the sort of social service side of things, if you will. And I decided to go with the social service side. And so I ended up working at becoming design director at the Leche League International. And so then after being there for a few years, they ended up reaching out to Bostrom. And then that's where you and I met and sort of, starting this experiment of could we develop a marketing department within Bostrom?
Yeah, you're a hire number 1 in what is now a almost 9 or 10 person team.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, to think that it all started from, way back in 2015, like just me, it was just me and you were the entire marketing team, to now, have so many people working on these projects together, and it's amazing. We finally, when we had Zoom meetings, the whole screen filled,
Right.
I'd say
right.
It's a project, and it's still growing.
Yeah, it is, which is great. But you definitely, La Leche League was your launch into nonprofit, into that association world. And now you've been able to work with a wide variety of clients, whether they're trade groups, everything from automotive medicine to demolition and recycling, professionals, and expanded shell clay and slate institute manufacturers, a little bit of everything. So it's, it's interesting. And for those of you listening, Josh is very fit. He is into weight training, bodybuilding, and it was so interesting the first time that I met you, and you were doing these images of motherhood and very feminine, soft imagery and just beautiful design. And so that was just what a balance, right, of your life and the physicality, of what you do in terms of weight training and staying fit, and then the softer side of design and nonprofit work. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of the nature of design, right? That's what I enjoyed about it, was that you kind of have to take yourself out of it a little bit, and that's where design is no longer art. really, because in art you're trying to sort of say something, whereas design there's a certain technical purpose that it needs to meet, and so you kind of have to remove yourself, and so it becomes more about knowing your audience, knowing the clients that you're working for and what their end goals are, and so that's where you kind of have to really stretch yourself, because going from these things that I'm interested in, they're completely unrelated to, breastfeeding.
Yeah, right. Guitar and weightlifting versus, or martial arts to motherhood and the natural progression of breastfeeding and what that means for the baby and all of that. It was just, yeah.
And really trying to do your best to empathize with where they're coming from, and channel that into what everyone's working towards, creatively speaking.
It's funny, we always think about that in marketing, but taking that to the level in design is really, really key, because imagery means so much, almost more than copywriting. So recently you picked up from Chicago, moved to Texas, left the burbs of Chicago to a remote farm in Texas. So that's been quite a lifestyle change for you. And we meet weekly and we talk about what's going on with rehab projects and DIY projects. And I just wondered, can you relate to DIY and association work? Like, are those interrelated at all?
Absolutely, 100%. I think when it comes to associations, just like DIY, you have to have a can-do attitude and you have to be resourceful. You're not always given the tools you need or want, and you still have your objectives to make. And while you're trying to reach those end goals, reach those objectives, there's still that need for resourcefulness when things don't go right or things aren't lined up the way you'd want them to be. So, for instance, if you're trying to get, something on a website, but you have to draw from this unrelated database, you have to figure out how to make those things work, because,
right.
Not everyone has, a full suite of materials that all work well together. So, and then you have different budget constraints and those sorts of things. And so, I think when it comes to DIY and associations, a lot of it is about the resourcefulness. And a lot of these associations too are kind of in their roots a DIY. Someone saw a need for something within their industry and they just started bringing that up on their own, right?
To make an improvement or make a change or build something.
A lot of these organizations and associations are, a grassroots sort of effort.
That's true.
And, to think maybe they're starting from an unrelated industry, they're in the medical field, but now they're branching off into, associations to try and start something.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, for sure. We talk about disruption in the association world, but it's really surprises, right? And DIY is full of surprises. And then how do you be resourceful to make those into opportunities, So that's great.
And sometimes those snags, actually lead to something better that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Yeah, true. Those challenges that have been thrown at us the last few years certainly have, changed the way we think about meetings and education delivery and a lot of things digitally and how we work. So, I talked about all of the different associations that you've worked with. It started with the Leche League, but you've been working with a lot of different clients here and building their brand and what that, design framework looks like. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your design process. You talked about getting into the heads of the person, or the audience, but what goes through that? What really is behind that process of building a brand?
It starts with a lot of questions for the client. And not always, there's always what's your goals? Who's this for? What's a lot of branding we do are for events. So, what's the theme? and then you ask, what sort of things are you thinking and do you already have in mind? Because sometimes you kind of want to know if they have a preconceived idea, and you hand something off to them and they're like, well, I was actually hoping for this, but then you can get into some untangibles, right? You kind of want to try to, I always like to try to feel them out as the organization, at least out as if it were an individual, sort of like what music would I listen to,
like
right?
a personality.
It's sort of like, those personas that you develop. And what that ends up leading me to is trying to find the right materials that communicate who they are as an organization. So maybe I'll steer away from certain font choices or color palettes, or maybe I'll go on the more feminine side, or maybe I'll go more aesthetically creative and something that's a little bit more higher thinking, so to speak. Or maybe it's just meant to be straightforward. They're just straightforward people, no frills. They just want a well-balanced, good-looking logo, right? Like AAAM, I think, was a fun one because they're essentially a medical organization that deals with some very scientific things and science related to traffic safety, right? And that spans the gamut between the medical field, but also all the way into development of different safety features in cars, or sometimes even just a sign or narrowing the roads so they have to drive slower, which then makes the road safer through residential areas because people become more cautious when the roads are more narrow. Like weird psychological tricks like that.
Right.
And so for them, what was really fun was trying to find that balance, right? What's sort of highly technical, but also straightforward enough that it's accessible to those wide-ranging audiences that they are. And so a lot of that then fell on thinking about some of the formulas they would use, one of which from physics is the idea of impact time, and impact time is essentially what causes injury is how sudden you're stopping, right? And so that's how they develop crumple zones in cars. So they actually want parts of the car to brake, so you're increasing the impact time, which then allows that energy to dissipate around the vehicle before it finally meets you. And so that's when, we go ahead and we slant the A's, so all the A's ended up being slanted forward to help. And there's 3 of them. So, and then they're in a gradation. And so you have the slanted A pattern, this in a gradation that helps reflect sort of that idea of crumple zones and impact time.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that was behind that.
I was thinking mathematically, getting into more of a golden ratio type thing. And so if you really break down how that logo is constructed, it all fits into a golden rectangle, and all where the big lines are lined up with like where the square would be in that. And so,
wow. So for the listeners, we're talking about AAAM, and it was started by race car drivers that were actually an emergency physician, like kind of started looking into safety, dealing with race car driving, but that has grown into this incredible organization where they are dedicated to eliminating, road traffic incidences, and they created an abbreviated injury scale and everything like that. So, but if you look at the logo, I encourage people to go to AAAM.org and you'll see what Josh has been describing here. So that was AAAM. Are there any other logo projects that you did that had a different bend to them?
Yeah, so kind of getting away from maybe a technical side would actually be one with ACCME, where this one was a little bit more, they wanted more of an emotional feel to it because it was just post-COVID, everyone's coming back together. And really what they were going for was this feeling of like rising above essentially like all the chaos that had been happening, everything that was going on. They wanted a sense of overcoming, and not only just coming back, but thriving from it. And so they're saying was learn to thrive, right? So with that, then, I do still like to draw on some mathematical principles. So I used golden ratios. To basically, essentially, I started thinking about, again, they're going for a feeling, right? And so I started thinking about this concept of out of the chaos, or out of something really scary, but you're like better for it. And I started thinking about a bird's first flight. Imagine being a bird, right? And you're a tiny little baby bird.
Yeah.
You're a little sparrow on a branch, like, 300 feet in the air.
Oh
I don't
my
know.
God.
And now you got to learn to fly sometime, and the only way to do it is just do it. So you just take that leap, right?
Right.
But within that, you end up, taking off. You spread your wings, you fly, you start rising above all that craziness.
And it's a whole new world. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I did was then from there, I went and looked at sparrows, and sort of, I loved, the reason I was drawn to the sparrows too is, again, we're trying to create like this emotional feeling on this end, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't just be like any bird. But what I liked about the sparrow is their tails. Their tails are very animated. They're long, they flow, they have a very sort of grace
Yeah.
to how they move. And I thought, from an artistic standpoint within the logo, that would look really cool and give some motion to the logo.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I looked at sparrows, and then I created a sparrow using a technique that many other logos are created from, where you basically overlap circles to create the shape within their overlaps. So that ends up creating the shape of the sparrow, but instead of removing the rest of what would be the circle, I left that in. So what you end up seeing is a bunch of circles converging to something that looks chaotic, but then you fill in the center, and then you see the bird within
And then
it.
that's so cool.
And that worked in many ways, because, you have this feeling of this animated soaring bird rising above this like chaotic field, all around it. But then it also gave me some assets to play with throughout the entire conference, because now I have circles to work with. I have the bird, and then I was able to actually take the bird a step further and almost treat it as a character throughout the conference.
Oh, that is so
cool. I had
cool.
different iterations of it to point one way or the other. And so the bird itself almost became like a mascot for it.
Yeah. And, it was relevant and timely for coming out of the pandemic, but I understand they use it today. They're using it for every conference every year.
Yeah, I guess that one's, and this is one of those, I guess, more, they don't always happen this way. It's kind of a rare moment, but when you do get them, it feels really good, where it strikes such a chord with them that they want to hang on to it. And I think, one of the people on the team actually had an emotional response with it, which was what we were going for, right?
Yeah.
And so that felt really good, because, after talking with them and, just trying to get into that space with what they're going for, that was, again, now I'm drawing on a different technique. I'm not really thinking technically in the sense of mathematics beyond just like your general basic principles of creating a logo, but, I'm trying to think more emotional about it. And one of the challenges with that too is also trying to keep it somewhere within their own brand guidelines. And so what I ended up doing was drawing more on their tertiary color palettes to separate it from their main brand, but also within their tertiary palette was some more energetic, lively colors that I could play with.
Right. That's great. It was a great compliment to their main brand for sure. So, okay, this question I'm a little afraid to ask, but all of that thought behind those brands that you just talked about, did you ever use AI to develop those? Any AI technique in those?
Just myself.
Just you as AI.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no. I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I know there was no AI used on those, but AI is hitting marketing pretty fast. We've all been diving into these tools and using them and everything. So I don't know how AI could ever come up with the thought and the emotional process that went into those designs, but I would like to get your thoughts on AI and how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to go completely screaming, running on the streets, doom and gloom, a neo-Luddite, but in all reality, I feel like there, as with many things, it's not what it is, but how it's used. And as with most things, as it enters our field, we're going to adapt and new niches within our profession will develop while others fall away, but there'll always be, I think, this need for humans to drive the AI.
The use, right? The use.
Yeah. Because especially when you talk about emotional things, right? Like I said, with the ACCME logo, it was more of an emotional thing. How can you have an AI try to feel what it is you're supposed to be looking at? You know what I mean? Like for when you're looking at something artistic or something that you really like, you don't always know why you feel a certain way about it, but you do.
Yeah.
And the designers and artists that created that are the same way. And that's something you can't replicate with artificial intelligence. But where it can shine is more in acting as sort of an aid. Right now I use AI all the time with Photoshop. Every time I need to knock out a background image, it uses AI to detect the background of the image and save the subject and remove the image. Very, very good.
Oh.
Back in the day, many, many years ago, you had to have some technical skills with Photoshop, especially when it comes to hair, getting hair out of a background, let alone a complicated background. Very challenging. It can be very challenging. And now it's just like a click of the button and it's like, thank you. In that regard, AI is great.
Yeah. So it's adding efficiency, I think that's great. It's how you use the tool, and it is technology, which is a tool, that hopefully can help us, be more efficient and work more effectively. So that's interesting.
And I think you do as a designer, and especially for new designers, they have to remember or should know is like, you do need to develop the basic skills of a designer or a creative. You can't, sure, you could go in into some program and type in an image and say, I want an image that looks like this based on this artist, which then also draws in a whole bunch of copyright issues.
Right.
That's a whole nother subject.
Well, I mean, that whole Writers Guild strike is all about that,
because especially when you're pulling in styles or basing it on other pieces of imagery, but you could type in, hey, I want this sort of image that looks like this, and then you get that image. But you still need to, there's still going to be things in it that's like, compositionally this is off, these colors don't go well, there's this here, this line doesn't match up right, it's not generated properly, there's something off with it. I was playing around with even Adobe Firefly, which is some of their AI, with their type to text, and you could create like different images within that. And, it was like a fun toy, but it wasn't like quite there.
Yeah.
And then there's other tools like font pairings, that you can try to, one of the things designers do is pair fonts, right? And you have to start to develop a database within your mind of like what fonts work well together. And you're looking for things like contrast and type, X heights that work well together, and characteristics that don't really clash a whole lot. And so this one AI attempts to do that. And again, it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, thank you for the help, I'll take it from here.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You still need that human element for sure. Yeah.
I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime where anything artistic gets 100% replaced. And I do think that, humans, and we innately want to create. And so I don't think we'll ever let it get that far.
Where we would stop creating. There's,
And there,
we created AI.
Yeah. And there's even like people, they'll have a logo created with AI and then they'll bring it to a designer and say, hey, can you fix this for me? But at least it helps them kind of look within that process, and that right there could be another market, right? As a designer, oh, hey, I fixed AI logos.
That's true.
But
that's true.
I think that
interesting.
It does also maybe can help the client get the designer a little bit on board with what they have in their head. So that could be actually used for it too, Yeah,
that's an interesting use of that for sure. Yeah, it skips a lot of steps, maybe trying to get both on the same page,
Yeah.
Or at least helping them communicate what they want. Yeah.
And it's one of those things I always say, I like to think on paper, because sometimes it's easier to just like draw it out and show somebody what it is I'm thinking, as opposed to trying to just only use words.
Yes. Yeah, oh, for sure. And that would help that.
Yeah.
That would help that communication, Okay, so we're getting to the point where we are up to our rapid fire Q&A section of the podcast. Are you ready, Josh?
I guess I have to say yes.
Yeah, you can't say no and then just go away.
Well, technically, I can.
Well, you could, but I don't want you to. Okay, so these are fast questions. I know that you would love to have, minutes and minutes of time to think about them, but they're really rapid fire. Okay? Just whatever comes to your head.
Well, that could be dangerous.
Here we go.
All right.
What is your current state of mind?
A little bit excited, a little bit confused.
Okay. What do you most value in your colleagues here at Bostrom?
I think I have to say a sense of camaraderie. There's been many instances where things get really tough, and everyone here just bands together and helps each other like figure out a way through it. We all support each other, and that's really invaluable. It doesn't matter where you are, where you work, to have people that are around you who can help lift you up when it's difficult, whether it's a personal matter or just you're swamped with work. I think camaraderie.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Especially with remote work, and we really need that connection. And that's great. What characteristic makes you well suited for working with associations?
I think it is, going back to the DIY thing, the resourcefulness.
Yep.
I heard this phrase to describe oneself as a multi-potentialite, as a person with many interests that can do pretty much anything. They like to get into different things.
Yeah.
And I found over the course of my time at Bostrom, I'm never doing the same thing over and over again. It's always something new, always something different. Yeah. I'm always sent on some other thing to learn that's new or to try differently and in a different way. And so I think, that sort of resourceful nature and my general persona of like liking different things. I have many interests. I think that's well suited for Bostrom, well suited for associations in general.
Okay. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
There's a couple, but I think most recently finishing up a second bathroom in my house. That was hard. That was really hard.
Yes. So that is not easy. That is not easy.
Most recently, that would be it.
What do you consider your greatest achievement with an association client?
Oh, man. Again, I think that goes to there's so many, because I can think of multiple clients, and it's really whenever you get that feeling that you knocked it out of the park for them. I can think of a few associations where like they had that response you're looking for. They really loved what you did, or the audience responded so well to whatever it was that you were going for. When a client comes back and says, "This is great. The response has been amazing." That's like, for me, like what it really comes down to. Or I was at a conference one time, and I went on site to check out, how things were going after we had produced all the materials. I wanted to see them at the event live. And one of the association members came up and started talking to our meeting manager and saying, "Hey, I don't know who did these things. And, but they're just, really above and beyond. And I really love these. And they really just feel great for the association." And she's like, "Well, if you want to," I was standing right there. And so she introduced me. And so I got to hear from an association member that I would have never met had I not gone to just check on the artwork there. And they had something great to say.
Oh, wow.
And so it feels really good, because, you try really hard. You want to do the best for people. And when
and sometimes you don't get to see the end result.
Yeah.
You don't get to see the impact or the reaction or anything, and you got to see it on site.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Which talent other than design would you most like to have?
I don't know. I could be really selfish about it, or I could be really,
Go for the selfish. Go for the selfish.
I think I would love to have, I love music, I love playing guitar. But I think when it comes to composition, I would love to have the amazing ability to compose really meaningful music. There's one artist out there that
you're a creator.
Yeah, and he's like my musical counterpart. His name is David Maximicic. He's a Serbian guitarist, composer, and he does a lot of instrumental work. And he does that thing where he takes it from one mood to the next, and you're right along with him, and it's just compositional masterpiece. I would love to be able to do that. So, and within that, you have to have a lot of technical capabilities as well, because, he's for the longest time was doing it from a bedroom in his apartment. And so he's on a laptop running these tools and software to create these things. And, so pretty amazing,
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. All right. What is your favorite word?
Was it catawampus? That's my new favorite one.
I think that's
because I feel like everything I've run into around this house lately is catawampus.
Catawampus. Okay, last question. What profession I think I know this, but what profession other than working with associations would you like to attempt?
Yeah, I think had it not been something with graphic design and associations, it would have been music.
Music, yeah.
Some sort of venture.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been great, Josh. Thank you so much for doing this. And we are wrapping up our episode 2, and our next episode 3, is going to be speaking to one of our younger association professionals that entered the workforce right during or right after the pandemic, which I can't even imagine what that would be like. But once again, Josh, thank you so much for your time for doing this today. And so long, everybody, and hope you can hear us on episode 3.